Hello. Here, let me make you my co-host. All right. Hi, Kristina. Oh, I can't hear you. I think you're still muted. Let me see if I can I'm gonna unmute. Oh, there we go. Hi.
Hi, how's it going?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Sorry, I just needed a sip of water.
No,
I'm
I
doing
get it. I'm
well.
staying hydrated as well.
Staying hydrated. I'm doing really well. I'm super excited for today's webinar.
Me too. Me too. I'm so glad that you were able to do this.
Of
I'm gonna
course.
It's like high noon, right on time. I know folks are going to trickle on in. So what we can do is we can just get started with a little bit of an intro for me, and then I'm going to just kick it on over to you. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Wonderful. So I want to welcome everyone who is here so far and who will be joining us. My name is Rachel Murray. I'm the co-CEO of She Geeks Out. And if you don't know who we are, we run empowering, fun, and educational events for women in tech. And we also offer corporate training on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so today we are here presenting a really fun and important webinar called Call Me Maybe, Making Mentorship Stick with the lovely Kristina Lopes. And if you don't mind, I'm going to give a little brief bio of you.
Oh,
So Kristina is an HR operations lead at edX, a Harvard and MIT-backed education startup where she's had the opportunity to impact at scale. Starting off in a talent acquisition role, Kristina partnered with managers across the company to address their hiring challenges, create a talent strategy, and deliver top talent. Currently, she oversees edX's new hire orientation program, employee engagement and recognition initiatives, and training and professional development for edXers. You are very busy. And you've also been involved in strategic talent initiatives around performance management, career pathways, and workforce analytics. And so before I kick it over, just for those of you who are joining us and who are new to this and Zoom, if you have any questions or comments, you can feel free to leave them in the chat box on the bottom right. There should be a little option for you to do so, and you can chat at just us, or you can chat at everyone who's attending. So that is that. So I'm going to kick it over to you.
yeah. Thanks so much for the warm intro. I'm sure I'm not as busy as you.
Well,
A
I don't know
little
about that.
prouder that you are. I'm really excited for this webinar because this is a topic I think that I've been meaning to kind of share my experiences on. And I'm no stranger to working with SGO. I know last year we had done a keynote speech at X, and I had talked about kind of career adversity and what that might look like and how to come back from that. And mentorship also kind of ties into that. And over the past 4 years that I've been at edX, I've seen a lot, both in more traditional talent acquisition and now in talent management and development. So happy to kind of share my learnings with all of you.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd love to share this presentation. I actually not sure how to.
Oh, yeah, sure. So there should be a little button on the bottom that says
Okay.
share.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Got it?
Got it.
Great.
All right. That said, let's go ahead and get started.
Fabulous. I'm going to mute myself, but if you need me, I'm here.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Here we go. Let's see. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, it looks fabulous.
Perfect. Okay. So what we're going to touch upon today, really, I think what I'd like to do with this presentation, what this presentation I envision it being is kind of just sharing my experiences, my background in mentorship. I've done a lot at edX here on site and then also outside of edX. I always like to preface this with, I have way more failure stories than I have success stories in mentorship, because that's really what it boils down to at the end of the day. It's a lot to do with learning your strengths and weaknesses as a mentor, as a mentee, kind of finding that chemistry with your mentor or mentee. So I think for every one success story, I probably had 3 or 4 failures. And that said, I kind of want to turn it over to you and talk about your strengths and weaknesses as a mentor mentee. Do you have some of those skill sets already in your toolbox? Are you not taking advantage of them? And then, I want to talk about what we think about when we hear the word mentorship. I think traditionally, we think that it's much more of an art than it is a science, but there is a lot of science that goes behind adult development and how we tend to learn. So we'll talk about learning psychology. And then following up with, adult learners, I have some best practices that I've put together in my experiences here at edX, and, other things I've learned along the way that I'd love to share with you, some quick tips. I think that what this presentation is not, and what I pretend to never be, is the end-all be-all, the best and only perspective on mentorship. I think it's not a one-size-fits-all type of approach. So please bear that in mind as we go through. But I'm really excited to share what I've uncovered. Cool. So before I dig into specifics of mentorship, I just wanted to share this little story. So my partner and I, we recently went on a kayaking trip for my birthday. He surprised me. I'd been on my wish list for a while and had really wanted to go on the Charles, and so he got a kayak. He got a 2-person kayak. And here we are paddling out on the Charles, and there were tons of kayaks around us. It was kind of mayhem, but for a brand new kayaker, I noticed there were a lot of people, and like the 1-person kayaks, and then you had your 2-person kayaks, and we're looking around, and we noticed that we were able to get much further as new we were to kayaking. We were able to get much further with less effort than the solo kind of 1-person kayaks. Even the novice kayaker that was brave enough to cross the Charles from one side to the other, we were able to kind of get there faster. And we were probably able to get there. We were able to get further, but not faster. We started around like the Longfellow, we went past the Harvard Bridge, but essentially I think we were able to get further as opposed to faster. And I really wanted to kind of start this presentation with talking about this philosophy of working in a group. And I think that this proverb really resonated with me. I think it's a great analogy for mentorship, right? Because you have this concept of a long-term benefit versus a short-term gain. Like if you want to travel really fast, you should just travel alone. You know what you want, you can just go after it. But if you want to get further in your career, if you want to get further in your personal life, it really does make sense for you to travel with someone, to share the ups and downs of that journey with someone else. And I think, for those of you who are coming to this webinar today, maybe some of you are brand new mentors. You're either stumbling upon mentorship due to professional obligations at work, or maybe someone reached out to you who's interested in what you're doing, or maybe you're an experienced mentor and you're like, hey, I've mentored a ton of folks, and I know that every new mentoring relationship comes with a fresh set of challenges. So I think regardless of where you are in your relationship to mentorship, there's definitely benefit to sharing, accepting knowledge from others. You just don't know what you don't know. And I think that's true no matter where you are, at what stage in your career that you're at. So I actually want to go back a slide here because I think I'd skipped kind of some broad strokes about myself and my experience with mentorship. In terms of what I've done specifically within the mentorship realm, here at edX, I was just telling Rachel, I've been here for 4 years, and I think in the startup space, it's almost like dog years. 1 year is like 3 years, and 4 years is, I don't even want to think about how long, but I've seen
400 years.
Yeah, 400 years. I've seen edX when we were less than 100 people, and now we are growing past 200. So I think here at edX, I had different facets of mentorship that I experienced. One, I actually went after my own, my first personal mentor. She was actually a senior recruiter, a senior level exec that I had recruited when I was a recruiter. And And I reached out to her because she knew a lot about business school. I was interested in business school at the time. And, you know, she knew a ton. No one really on my team knew a lot about this space. And I asked her out for a coffee date. And that coffee date literally changed the trajectory of my entire life. So that was kind of my first sense of, wow, this really can mean something to have these people in my network. Also at edX more, I think, in terms of business mentorship, I did take part in a pretty extensive working group where I met with different leaders, one of whom was in engineering at the time. And we did extensive research and reading on what makes good mentoring at a company. I think that there's a lot of benefit in terms of talent development, in terms of retention, in terms of company ROI and investing in mentorship. So did a lot of that work. And I also helped kind of revamp some onboarding business mentorship programs. At edX, we have something called the Buddy Program, which is a informal, looser type of mentorship between a new hire and a designated person on their team or someone that they'll work with cross-functionally to really answer their questions and be a sounding board during their ramp-up period. So that's a lot of my experience at edX. I also, outside of edX, kind of ventured out into the community and was interested in giving back. I saw that there was an opportunity at MIT to mentor an undergraduate as part of their program. So they have a program called the MAP program. And I was lucky enough to mentor someone. She was a first-year chemical engineering student, bright, very, very smart, but was new to college and new to this very intense environment that is MIT. So, you know, it was my first formal mentorship program. We had a match day. We spent a lot of time together. We filled out a mentorship contract. But I felt like this relationship in particular, this mentoring relationship, I felt like during our time together, I was much more invested in my mentee than perhaps she was. I think that she was kind of just, you know, a freshman at college, kind of, you know, figuring things out, and she didn't really know what she wanted. And I think that kind of made me realize that mentorship is a two-way street. You really do have to have an active partnership in order for it to work. So following that experience, I went on to join YMPN Boston. I did some volunteer work with them as a volunteer board member. And at that point, I was managing a team of like, I want to say 4 or 5 people, 5 people because someone on my team had left. And, you know, I was both a manager and a mentor because this is a volunteer opportunity. You're giving a lot of time to this organization. If you're not familiar with them, it's Young Nonprofit Professionals Network. But this team, the team that I had been mentoring, I had a much better experience because they knew what they wanted out of the relationship. And so each meeting they came prepared, they knew what they wanted to talk about. So it was a much more fulfilling experience, I think, than the last. So again, like, I think why I'm sharing all of this is because it's something that at some point in your career you're going to stumble upon. Mentorship is, again, seen as an art, but it's also a science. And I think that I've seen good and bad mentorships. And really, you know, I think that there's no one size fits all approach, but there's definitely some learnings that I can share with you today. Cool. So I'm going to skip over here to the self-reflection exercise because enough talking about me. I wanted to learn about who's on the webinar today and want to make sure that I'm catering what I'm sharing to the needs of the audience. So first wanted to kind of ask, what's your relationship with mentorship? Are you kind of brand new to this concept? You have no experience? Are you kind of just generally interested? Like you're thinking about asking someone to be your mentor, or maybe you're interested in having a mentee and taking that on. I'm happy to share with you offline about my experiences. Maybe you've had some surface level experience. Maybe you've been in a mentoring relationship, but it wasn't really anything like noteworthy and anything that blew you out of the water that that you'd like to share. Or maybe you're a novice, like maybe you're a longtime mentor, mentee, and you're interested in learning new things about mentorship. So let's take a moment for you guys to fill out that poll.
Here, let me start it here too. And some people are already chatting, which is great. So
great.
Let me launch this poll. It's the what's your relationship with mentorship? So I'm going to launch this poll and we'll give it a minute or two. And thank you to the group that's watching on a big screen. That's very exciting. This is great. A bunch of people are filling it out. Kristina, can you see the poll as well?
I can, yes.
Oh, great. Good. So you can report out as you like. We have about...
it's filling up rather quickly.
Yeah, about 2/3.
It keeps on shifting. I'm interested.
Exciting.
Okay, it seems like right now we have about almost 85% of you have voted. And it seems like the majority here, it's kind of split. So general interest, you'd like to maybe have someone be your mentor, you're interested in having a mentee. So I have some tips on like how to approach potential mentors or even mentees. And then I do have some kind of, I've been in a mentoring relationship, but it was nothing noteworthy. So I think regardless of where you are in the spectrum here, I'll be able to share some tips and some tricks. I think I also wanted to kind of self-reflect, have you guys self-reflect on what your best attributes are. So I do have another question here, which is what attributes do you feel best describe you? And if you could pick one from each selection, I want to see what we come up with.
All right, here we go. I'm going to launch this poll. There we go.
Okay, so we have 3 sets of attributes. We have, are you a very talkative person? Perhaps you're an expressive like me that likes to talk a lot. Or are you more of an amiable? Are you more of a listener? Are you shy? Are you a little bit more sociable? Or are you serious versus lighthearted? Or lighthearted versus serious? So I'll give you guys some time to fill that out. Okay, so it seems like we're at a majority right now. So about 80% of you, say 82. Let's see, so talkative or listener. A lot more of you are listeners. And so it seems like that would make sense as you are attending a webinar as opposed to giving one. Shy or sociable, more of you are sociable, you feel. And then more of you are lighthearted as opposed to serious. So
classic She Geeks Out audience.
That's great. Yeah. That makes so much sense. Okay, so with these 2 questions, really what my objective was to kind of get a sense of the audience and what some of your best attributes are. I think the cool thing about mentorship is that, again, it's not a one-size-fits-all equation. And so any of those attributes, whether you're shy, whether you're reserved, or whether you're very expressive or sociable or talkative or a listener, any of those attributes can contribute to being a really good mentor or a really good mentee. It's just you got to work with what you have. So, for those of you who are new to mentorship, let's just talk about mentorship in a nutshell. So really, mentorship is a relationship. It's a relationship in which usually a more experienced or more knowledgeable person helps guide a less experienced or less knowledgeable person that's often called the mentee. The mentor doesn't necessarily have to be older. They could be younger, but really that person, the mentor, must have a certain area of expertise for the mentee. And I think, you have your personal mentorships, like my personal mentorship with with someone who introduced me to business school, or you have your more kind of corporate business mentorship programs where perhaps you're paired with, let's say if you're a developer, a senior level developer, because you're trying to get to your way to principal. So you have informal mentorships, but really at its core, mentorship is a relationship of learning. And I think that I love this slide because Powerpuff Girls was one of my favorite cartoons growing up.
Me too.
Sugar, spice, and everything nice. So there's no one right ingredient, right, Rachel? Like you know, you could be talkative, you could be quiet, you could be sociable, you could be shy. Really, it's how you work with what you have, what your natural strengths are. So there's no perfect ingredient, just the right attitude. I think for the mentor, they really need to take a learner-centered approach, kind of listening to what the mentee's objectives are in the relationship, so that you want to make sure that you're not serving the wrong needs, right? You have to be willing to learn, willing to listen. You have to be vulnerable. I think vulnerability goes a long way. And sometimes you do have to advocate for your mentor for your mentee as needed. And I think this is especially true in more of a business setting. If you are a business mentor, your role is to advocate for that person. And it doesn't necessarily have to be for a promotion or for a pay raise or anything like that. But it could be as small as advocating for them on projects. Like, hey, I'm working with XYZ person. I've been working with them for a while now, and I think that they really do have the skills to take on this project. So really, there's a lot to think about there as a mentor, and you want to make sure you're serving the needs of that mentee. On the flip side, mentees also have skin in the game. So you, of course, have to be willing to listen and learn to what the mentor is saying. Sometimes what the mentor is saying may not perhaps be coming from experience that you're familiar with, and you just have to be kind of open to new ideas and new ways of thinking. And you too, you're responsible for being vulnerable with your mentor. So I think you have to kind of share with them where you are today and where you'd like to be, and be very open about what some of your strengths and weaknesses are. I think that you should, as a mentee, kind of think of this relationship as any professional relationship you have. I like to use the analogy of think of walking into your one-on-one meeting with your manager. I think for more junior employees, perhaps, you may let your manager drive the agenda for the meeting. And for more tenured, more senior employees, you're walking into that meeting fully prepared. You have an agenda, you know what you want to talk about, because really it's your meeting and you should be driving. So you should be declaring with your mentor what you're trying to get out of the relationship, how often you're looking to meet, how you like to communicate, all of those things. And so I think, again, like both having skin in the game will make it a successful relationship. Okay, so I think in terms of the science behind mentorship, a lot of you are probably interested in. There's a lot of adult learning psychology here, and I've read a ton of literature, and I'll share some of those resources with you. But I like to use this. I'm all about analogies, by the way. So there's another analogy. For those of you who work in the tech space, you're probably familiar with Agile. It's a methodology for Agile run tech companies where you're rolling out products based on iterative work, right? So in Agile, let's say you start with a skateboard, and over many sprints and many iterations of meeting and kind of refining the skateboard, you find later on that you end up with a sports car. And I think adult development, from what I've read and what I've experienced, it is very similar. It's much more than just, I think, your kind of the traditional perception of what a mentor-mentee relationship is. It's much more than a cognitive process of just receiving information. And so really adults want to be engaged. They want to be engaged in the relationship. They want to have some ownership, some skin in the game. And as a mentee, as an adult mentee, they're best engaged when they too are involved in diagnosing what they need to work on, planning, creating a plan and creating goals around what they need to work on, rolling that out, implementing, and even evaluating their own learning. So it is almost like, I would say that they are in the driver's seat. They're in the co-driver's seat for the relationship. And as a mentor, I think it's important too to recognize, as an adult mentor, your role is shifting from more of this authority figure to a facilitator. For you Star Wars fans out there, you might think that you are the only Jedi master, but really the person that you're training, your Padawan, will eventually be a Jedi master one day. So you need them to kind of practice their skills, kind of iterate, fail a lot, and it's okay for them to be involved in these conversations about evaluating how they've been doing. And also too, I think some other kind of logistics as far as really good environments in which adults learn in. So you're thinking about things like the length of the actual relationship. You need to stop focusing on like, this is going to be like a 6-month thing, and every month we're going to like focus on something different. Instead, you should be focusing really on individual goal mastery, and however long that takes, whether it's a couple of days or weeks or months, you need to focus on how do I master this goal first, and then moving on from there. Mentoring relationships, the number of them. So adults can have multiple mentors over a lifetime, and they can have multiple models or ways of mentoring, whether it's like a one-on-one, whether it's me mentoring like an entire group of people, or maybe a peer model. So back to the Star Wars analogy, there is not one Jedi master for every young upcoming Padawan. You really, while you may have a primary Jedi master, you really should continue to grow your mentorship network. And I think this also might benefit the mentors, because you don't want to be just kind of pigeonholing yourself and sharing all of your wealth and knowledge with one person, one mentee. You don't want them to be kind of the single point of failure for passing on this knowledge and what you've learned. You should be sharing it with more people. And then again, too, I think like in terms of setting, it doesn't always have to be face-to-face. I'm a really big fan of face-to-face because I think in this type of relationship where there's a lot of vulnerability and openness, I think it's helpful to read facial expressions. But we're adults, we're busy, we have lives. So you're going to have multiple and varied ways of connecting, whether that's like, hey, I can't meet today in person. Can we do a video chat or a phone chat or some other way of connecting is also helpful. So that said, I think, I touched upon this before. This is an active partnership. You're not just receiving information passively, you're speaking up and speaking often. And I think that in this active partnership, both the mentor and mentee, they have skin in the game. So you have to really kind of hold each other accountable and invest the same amount of effort. So I have some kind of quick tips, some do's, really just do's. I don't know, I put don'ts, but definitely you want to be thinking about the time that you're investing and the effort, in setting the environment for learning. So you, as a mentor specifically, you should be thinking about, again, the mentee and what their learning styles and needs are. So I'm thinking of myself, I'm a very visual learner. Or maybe your mentee needs to be in front of a whiteboard. Maybe they need to draw. Maybe they need a pen and paper to kind of really iron out those ideas. Or maybe they're the type of person that needs to repeat like everything you say all the time when you share something new. I had a mentee one time that would have to let me confirm that. So what you're saying is X, Y, and Z, and you feel like you're repeating yourself, and you are, because that's how they learn. Or maybe it's like, you need to meet in a quiet conference room in like a WeWork space as opposed to a noisy coffee shop. Identify whatever their needs are and really make an effort to meet them. And that includes kind of scheduling time as well on the calendar. Be responsive to the day-to-day needs of the mentee. I think it's not only about scheduling time on the calendar. You really have to be genuine about the connection that you're making. You need to ask the types of questions like, is this working? Are we getting what we, initially wanted out of this relationship? Do you feel like it's impactful? Ask enough questions to give you insight as far as that is concerned. And you also want to make sure that you're understanding like what the day-to-day obstacles are for the mentee. What are they seeing? What are they doing? How is that helping contribute to their growth? That's also very important. And then identify and use multiple venues for communication. This is self-explanatory, we already shared this, but making sure that you think about different options, whether it's email or video chat or regular telephone. Set a regular schedule, but be flexible. Agree on a contact schedule for both parties. Try not to cancel often. Again, thinking about kind of like that relationship with your manager. If you do need to cancel maybe 1-2 times, that's fine. But I think it kind of affects the morale of the relationship if you're just always canceling and pushing it off. It kind of goes to show that you're not invested in it, in the relationship.
Especially if it's a last minute cancel, I could imagine that would be upsetting.
Right, exactly. And if that person is traveling, if they do a lot of work travel, it's also inconvenient. And check on the effectiveness of the communication. Ask candid questions like, hey, are we like connecting here? Are we really, is how we're connecting, even the method of how we're connecting via video or phone or in person, is it working for us? Is it convenient or is it a pain? Like reevaluate that often. And you also want to make sure too that that each meeting results in something that you can take away from it. You want to make sure that you're learning not only as the mentee, but as the mentor. Is the mentee themselves kind of making progress on their own goals? You don't want to just have kind of a vapid, not impactful meeting. I'm sure you're going to have meetings where you're just kind of touching base and seeing how things are going, but really want to make sure that it results in some sort of meaningful impact. Okay, so I think that that kind of covers surface level on adult psychology. What are some things that you should be focusing on? How do you shift the paradigm of the mentor versus the mentee? And I noticed that a lot of you did have interest in pursuing a new mentor or perhaps even a new mentee. So I'll kind of frame this that way. In terms of pursuing a new mentoring relationship, I come from recruiting, so I have no problem. I have no problem reaching out to someone, whether they know me or not, on LinkedIn or over the phone, and just kind of showcasing interest. But I think for those of you who that might be a little bit more foreign to you, it's okay to, if you're not comfortable doing it in person, you could probably shoot them an email, kind of share with them your interest in meeting with them and why you'd like to meet with them. And once you kind of get that green light to meet with them, I think the primary meeting with the potential mentor or even mentee would be to kind of establish your rapport. talk about your background, talk about, why you want to do mentorship in the first place, talk about your experience with mentorship, if at all, and, kind of feel them out for, do they have the time commitment to do this? Do they have really the experience to do this? Am I going to get something out of this relationship? And also, am I going to be able to give something back to them? So I think that first meeting is really important, to kind of feeling out whether or not this person is the right fit for you. You want to make sure too that they're going to have skin in the game. And I would say that if you don't feel like they do have skin in the game, maybe reevaluate whether you want to pursue this particular relationship, because there are probably going to be other people out there with that skill set that you can learn from. Establishing goals. So I think meetings following that initial meeting, once you have confirmed that you'd like to work together, you should be asking the question, like, really, what do you want out of the relationship, and kind of putting to paper what you're looking for the relationship. So really writing down tangible goals, thinking about goal mastery, right? Like not thinking about just like, how many times am I going to meet with this person? What am I actually going to master in terms of, in terms of a skill set, or perhaps whether it's a soft skill or a technical skill. Be sure that you're very clear as both the mentee and the mentor, and define like what goal mastery looks like for you, because it might be different for each goal. And then I think over time, as you kind of fall into the rhythm of meeting with your mentor and or your mentee, and kind of seeing how that's going against the goal progress, you should be reevaluating how they're doing, and how the relationship is doing overall, right? Like discuss how it's been in terms of like the connection, in terms of what you're learning. Discuss like the meeting environment again. Is it crazy in a coffee shop? Is this not working? Do we need to have a more quiet space? And if helpful, I think drafting up a mentoring agreement after a couple of meetings may be good to kind of, again, put pen to paper what your objectives are, because you can reference back to this agreement. It could be a very simple kind of mentoring contract, if you will, so that you can hold each other accountable and be like, hey, like, remember when we signed this contract, you said that you were going to work on XYZ, but you've been really busy at work and I don't see the progress here. So progress here in this relationship for mentoring. So kind of hold each other accountable in that way. Okay, so in terms of resources, a lot of this learning that I've put together and shared with you comes from the mentorship working group that I worked on about 3 years ago at edX. And so I put together a mentorship best practice handout. So I'm actually going to share that with Rachel and share that with you so that you can take that with you. And as part of that handout, there is actually a sample mentoring contract with some sample goals, both soft skills and hard skills. So you can take a look at that. Another like, I would say like the Bible of mentorship for me, the North Star was really Lois Zachary's The Mentor Guide, as well as The Mentee Guide. I like that he has 2 books. They're amazing books. He has a lot of different kind of case studies on mentoring relationships, what went well, what didn't go well, charts, like tips from years of research. So those 2 books are amazing. You should definitely check those out. Laurent Deleuze's Mentor, Guiding the Journey of Adult Learners, talks a little bit more about psychology of an adult learner and how that works. And then, like, outside of this presentation, again, you can always find me on LinkedIn. I'm always available. You can email me, or I'm happy to share my personal email after this webinar. But again, this really is to share surface level what I've experienced really great mentoring relationships are, and hopefully you are able to take away some great tips and tricks.
Well, that's fantastic, Kristina. Thank you so much.
Of course.
And I've got some questions, but before I even get to mine, we've already got one question in the chat. So if people are up for asking questions, please send them along and I can read them out as they come in. So the first one is, do you have any stories for how you knew that your mentors, mentees were a good fit for you?
Yes. So I think the first one will be as a mentee, how I knew that my mentor was a good fit for me. I felt that my first mentee-mentor relationship as a mentee, I knew that my mentor was a good fit for me because she held me much more accountable than I held myself. It was, a new venture for me, being in a mentoring relationship, and she would actually check in with me because we worked together. She would check in with me like weekly. She would literally sat down the hall for me, would walk by my desk, ask me how I'm doing in relation to the business school application process, if I had any questions, if I needed more contacts, or how have I been doing with my school visits or my GMAT, or, just she was very present, I think. And that actually kind of shocked me. It really did change the trajectory of that relationship, changed the trajectory of my life. So I think she was just very on top of things. And, another example of of a relationship that didn't go so well was with my original mentee mentor relationship at MIT. I had worked with someone who was very bright, very intelligent, very smart and good person. I think that this particular person, however, didn't really know what she wanted out of the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was both a kind of big sister, which I was happy to be, and also kind of an academic counselor, but she didn't really come to me with any issues or problems. And so we had put together a contract, and I had referred back to it often, but she didn't really show any initiative to kind of follow up to show how she was doing on her mastery of these, different tasks. So I felt like I was kind of always checking in with her and maybe initiating with her too much, to the point where she was just like, oh, Kristina has it. Like, I don't have to do anything, but this is your mentoring relationship. We're trying to help you grow and excel. Mm-hmm. So I think that was an example of a time where it didn't go so well.
Yeah. That's great. And a bunch of questions have come in, so I'll just read them out in order. And one of them was actually mine, so that works out really well. So should a mentor relationship always be the same gender?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Yeah, I just noticed that my two examples were with women. I have another mentor here at edX that is actually a man. And I think that there's a book called Athena Rising that you should all read. And it talks about the importance of men mentoring women. Particularly, I think that my viewpoint is that in today's society, in the world that we live in, it's unfortunate, but there are more, I guess, men at the top of kind of C-level executive positions. And so while women are fully capable of taking on those roles, I think that there is something to be said about kind of learning from a man who's already in that position and who kind of knows the environment that, maybe being in leadership holds. So I think it's actually very important to diversify who you are a mentee or a mentor for or from. Mentee for or mentee of. So I think it is very important. I think though, I think women are very, just great mentors. And I don't know, I have an affinity for working with women, but I think that also men too, working with men, they can be just as caring and just as insightful as working with a woman.
Yeah, I could imagine that you would get different things from different people.
Right.
And I know there's like a new trend also for reverse mentorship, so different generations. So older folks getting mentored by younger generations as well. So I'll get them from all different places. And so, and relatedly, I'm going to skip a little bit because I think this is a little bit related. Mentorship versus sponsorship. So a recent article in Harvard Business Review talks about how women need sponsors rather than mentors, and how it's more effective in advancing their careers. Do you have any thoughts on the distinction, and how would you ask someone to sponsor you?
Yeah. So I think that a good mentor should, as part of their role and part of their kind of mentorship job responsibility, they should be sponsoring for you. That is kind of like a part of the job. I feel that sponsorship, I haven't read that article, so I can't speak too well to it. But I think that sponsorship in and of itself, you're advocating for that person, let's say in a particular project. That's great, but really I feel like that advocacy is almost disingenuous if you don't have the context of, hey, I've worked with this person, I've mentored this person, I know what this person's strengths and weaknesses are, and that said, this is why I'm sponsoring them on this project and on this, whatever it might be. So I think it's a blend. I think that the mentor really should be advocating and sponsoring that person to grow within the ranks of an organization.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually, because now that I think about it, I can see how a sponsor would always be a mentor, almost, because it would always be in sort of a work context. I'm thinking of a boss that I had who was definitely both. She was my boss, and she was also in both of those things.
Right.
And I can see how if you have a mentor that's maybe not in a position to advocate for you in that way, but they provide some other sort of mentorship role. Yeah, it's very interesting. Both are very important.
That's a great point. Yeah, I'll have to read that. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, that was great. Next up is, I love this. How do you, because I get nervous about this too, but I bet you don't, Kristina. How do you suggest to reach out to a mentor over LinkedIn, someone you don't know too well but have seen in the community?
Yeah, I've done that a ton. I've gotten some responses and I've gotten some just, not just no response. I was going to say ghosted, but we never talked in the first place. I think that if you approach it with, if you approach the message with kind of a genuine interest in what they're doing, kind of leading with that and saying, hey, like, I just have recognized what you're doing in the community and on social media, and I think what you're doing is great. Just starting off with that kind of just genuine kind of recognition, I think will go a long way. We all get pinged on LinkedIn a ton. And so I think that will kind of separate you from a recruiter or someone else that's kind of asking for a job opportunity. But I would just keep it very light. Don't over shower them with compliments because maybe it will come across as too strong, but just be like, hey, like I've been following your work. I really love what you're doing. I'm not sure if you're open to this, but I'd love to either grab a coffee with you or maybe someone that you might know who'd be interested in talking more about this, because I'm actually looking to be, in this area or be in this role kind of a couple years down the line.
Love it.
I think that goes a long way.
That's great. And thank you to, I think it was Brianna.
Yes.
Who, posted the link, and we can include that in the follow-up as well. So that was great. So next question, which I also appreciate, how do you find possible mentors when you're new to the job market? I'm a recent grad and am unsure how to find mentors while entering the job market, other than coming to a She Geeks Out event.
Yes, that's important. And say hi to me. How to find a mentor when you're new to the job market? Well, I think the first question is, what are you looking for a mentor for in terms of professional or personal? I think if you're looking in terms of professional, I think that it may be worthwhile to come to events like She Geeks Out, build your network that way. So not only like the depth of your network within the company, but the breadth of your network within the community. So coming to events like She Geeks Out, and that's important. But I think it's also helpful to kind of wait and be a couple months on the new job and see, kind of just observe and see within the company, who you look up to, who, even if it's not within your own job function, see who, maybe that person just has a certain presence about themselves, or is a really good public speaker, or just, has a way with giving presentations or something like that. I don't know, but kind of just observe first before you approach, because you also don't want to find yourself having like 10 different mentors and all of them being very kind of light relationships. You want it to be a really true kind of sounding board for your career and for your personal growth. So you want to make sure it's like the right person.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, next question. What do you recommend to be the first steps to transition from recruitment? So this is a slightly different question. I feel like it's a trick question. I feel like it's somebody that knows you or something.
Mm-hmm. Oh, probably.
Yeah.
From recruitment to like HR.
I guess maybe just another career.
Yeah. So I think it's a lot of things. I think it's self-initiative, number one. I think number two, it's luck, and it's also mentorship and advocacy. So in my situation, when I had shown interest in moving into an HR role, I actually just drafted up a job description. It didn't exist yet, and I kind of like shared it with my manager and the person in that department, and they didn't really have like an opening. And so I was patient, and also with luck and in time, and there was an opening. And so I with the mentorship and advocacy of my manager at that time, was able to transition from recruiting to kind of more HR, kind of business operations, partnership, stuff like that. So it's a mix of many different things.
Yes.
But if you ever want to talk more about that, I'd be happy to talk offline and give you some kind of some tips from my experience. It was not easy, but I think definitely doable.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, a couple more questions. Do you have any recommendations in regard to developing a successful mentorship program within an organization? Specifically, how do you approach buy-in, getting interested individuals on board with participating?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that my experience with business mentorship and setting up programs, I think with any kind of I don't want to use the cliche term like change management initiative. Whenever you're trying to like introduce a program, I think the first thing you have to do is make sure your leadership is on board to some extent, because what's going to happen is you're going to, run yourself dry, like putting a team together and doing all this research and work, and then come to find out that's not on the leadership team's agenda. That's not a priority of theirs. And so all that work gets put on the back burner. So to be very efficient with your time and respectful of your team's time, you need to ask, leadership what their thoughts are on introducing a mentorship program, and also kind of pitch it to them as far as what the benefits of having a mentorship program would be. There's definitely a lot of research from companies like Deloitte and other firms that talk about how mentoring can boost productivity of employees, can boost sales numbers and revenue, if done right. So I think start there, and then everything else kind of falls into place.
Yeah, it's a big undertaking for sure. Can direct supervisors be effective mentors of their staff? It's related to what we talked about earlier.
I think a good manager should be a mentor in a way. I think that all of the great managers I've had in my career, including my current manager, I don't know if she's watching this webinar, but I think that, it goes beyond looking at the job responsibilities of a person and kind of seeing them for who they are as a human being, as a person. Um, I think that kind of being able to speak to the work context of what they're doing and then also kind of the personal context of what they're doing really goes a long way. If anything, you can have very strictly professional manager type relationships. I'm not saying that that's not possible, but I think that really a good manager should also be a mentor, because you should be kind of asking and making time for your employee to say like, hey, like, what are your goals within your career? What are your professional aspirations? How can I help unblock you? So I think that it should be both.
I agree.
I
For what
agree.
it's worth.
Yes.
Those were all the questions in the chat. And
Great.
we've only got a few minutes left anyway, so it's perfect timing.
Yes.
Kristina, any other final thoughts?
No, this is great. I love all the questions. I'd be happy again to kind of talk offline if you guys want to ping me on LinkedIn. Really appreciate you coming today and hearing me talk about something that is really important to me. I wanted to kind of send the elevator back down and share all of my knowledge with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kristina. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure everybody on the webinar does as well. And so this is recorded, so we'll be sending out the recording, and we'll be sharing the handout that you have, as well as your LinkedIn address. So yeah, thanks everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.
Rachel. Bye.
Bye.